Hello and welcome back to the course on Python programming. I'm super excited about this section. We've got some very interesting tutorials and some outstanding visualizations coming up. And I can't wait to show you them and to walk through them and to learn how to create them together. But before we do proceed, there's one topic that we need to cover off, and that is categorical variables. It is quite an important topic. As you'll see, we'll be dealing both with numeric data and categorical data in this section, and it's valuable to get this topic out of the way from the very start so that we're on the same page going forward. So that's why we're going to dedicate this tutorial to categorical variables, and let's dive straight into it. Alright, first things first, we're going to import pandas as PD as usual, so that we can load our dataset, and we're going to import OS so we can change the working directory if we need to. So now we're going to just quickly check the working directory. As you can see, my working directory is correct. That is where I've put my dataset. Make sure that you've downloaded the dataset and placed it in the working directory where you're working, or if you need to then change the working directory, and by now you should know how to do that. In my case, I'm just going to proceed with loading the dataset. I'm going to create an object called movies, and I'm going to use a read CSV function to read movie ratings.csv. There we go. So now if I quickly check our standard, well, something that's becoming our standard check, the length of the file, we've got 559 rows. Okay, great. And if I look at the top couple of rows, I go movies head, and then you can see here we've got the top 5 rows. That's what they look like. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. Film genre, Rotten Tomatoes ratings, that's the audience ratings. Oh, that's the critic ratings, audience ratings, budget in millions of dollars, and year of release. Now the next thing we can always check is movie columns. Now we can see the columns in this case, but it's always a good idea to have a habit of doing these checks so that you don't forget next time you have a larger data set where you can't see all the columns, for example. Okay, so and another thing we notice is that the columns have kind of like weird names. They've got percentage signs, lots of spaces, and remember what we talked about previously, that spaces can be inconvenient if you want to access columns through the dot operator rather than using the square brackets. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename our columns. So we're going to say movie columns equals, and here we're going to just pass a list. So the first one is going to be film, there's no change. Then we'll say genre, no change again. Then we'll say critic rating, it's faster to type. Then audience. So just follow along, audience rating, so that we have the same names. And just I'm going to keep these singular: audience rating, critic rating, and then we're going to have budget millions. What did we say about a new line? In Jupyter, you don't have to put the backslash. In other IDEs, it's a good idea. And here we're going to say year. So if I run this line, and now I look at movies.head, forgot the brackets. If we look at that now, you can see that it's nice and neat and tidy. Film genre, critic rating, audience rating, budget millions, year. Beautiful. So that's us preparing our data set. Let's quickly proceed with the exploration. So what we've learned already, how to explore a data set, we're going to say movies.info, get some information. And so we see here our columns, our 6 columns. We've got 2 of them are objects, or are recognized as objects, and 4 of them are recognized as integers. So this is where everything starts getting interesting. You'll see that critic rating has been recognized as an integer, this column over here. That's 0 to 100. What is the rating in percentage terms that the critics gave to that movie? The audience rating, again, 0 to 100. The budget in millions, that's from $0 to some huge amounts. As you'll see, there are some movies. There's a movie with over $300 million in budget. So these are fair enough. But then we've got a column called year here, and it is also recognized as a number, right? Fair enough, it is a number, but is it really a number? Do we want to treat year as a number? That's the question we should ask ourselves. When we're going to be working with this data set, are we going to be treating year in a similar way that we're going to be treating these 3 columns? For instance, here we can add them, take the average, take the maximum, take the minimum, subtract these numbers from each other, work with them as normal numbers. Do we want to do the same with the year? And to answer that question, we can just use one of the functions that we already know, and it'll make things a bit clearer. So let's go and type in movies.describe. Remember that a function that tells us some stats around our numbers? Well, if we run that, you'll see that we've got the count, the mean, the standard deviation, the minimum, first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the maximum. And so these numbers make sense for critic rating, audience rating, and budget in millions, right? So it makes sense to take the average of the critic rating, audience rating, budget million. But as you can see for year, it makes completely no sense. It says 2009.152. What does that mean? What is the average of the years that we're dealing with? Or let's say the minimum. Well, minimum and maximum can kind of make sense, but these quartiles really don't make much sense, or so does just as the standard deviation. So there is not much point in these operations. In fact, they don't make sense. And that is because we really don't want to treat year as a number. That's not our goal. Year is more of a category for us. Yes, indeed, years are represented as numbers. They are represented as 2009, 2008. But for all we know, they could have been named in a different way. These could have been months, January, February, March, April, and so on. And we could have still conducted our analysis. So this just stands to show that in reality, year is not meant to be a numeric variable for us. It's meant to be a categorical variable. So how can we fix all of this? Well, first thing that we want to do is let's learn how to convert variables into categorical variables. Because even these two variables that are currently not recognized as numbers, they aren't really recognized as categories. They're recognized as just objects. So how do we turn them into actual categories? Well, the correct way of doing this is you call the variable, so in our case, film, and let's remember that we can run it like this, right? So we'll get the films like that, or we can even just put the dot, same result, because it doesn't have spaces in it. So we just call this a column, and then we type in dot as type. So we want to change the type, and we want to say category here. So if I run this, again, you'll see that it's printed out, nothing has changed. But what we'll do is we'll take movies.film equals, and we'll override it, because this is just returning the result of the operation. It's not actually changing the column itself. What we're going to do is we're going to set it as a category, and then we're going to overwrite the column that we already have. So if we run this, now if we look at movies.head, you'll see that really nothing has changed. But if we go into movies.info, you'll see that now film is recognized as a category. And that's exactly what we wanted. Now, if you've already studied R, or if you've taken my course on R programming, then you'll remember that in R, categories are called factors. And in R, it is a bit more detailed. You get more information on the factor and what unique values they are in that factor column, but we'll learn to do that in Python as well. So basically, categories in Python are very similar or alike to factors in R. And now what we're going to do is we're going to perform the same operation for the other columns. Let's make two of these. And here we're going to say genre. And here we're going to say year. All right, so let's run that. And now if we look at movies.info, you'll see that both of these, so genre and year, are now categories. And that's exactly what we wanted. And in terms of what we just discussed, if you'd like to know what are the unique values in that category, it's very simple. All you need to type in is movies.genre, for example, then say cat, then categories. Yes, so if you run this, you will get the unique values. So it's a very quick way to assess what levels. So in R, these would be called levels of a factor, and these are levels of a category in Python. What levels or what unique values that category holds. As you can see, we've got 7 different genres of movies. And finally, now if we call movies.describe, you'll see that year is no longer here. So Python has learned that the year column should be treated as a category and not a number, and therefore it's not including it in this describe or in these statistics that it's outputting for our data frame. So there we go. That's how we prepare our dataset. That's how we, once again, we revised how to explore our dataset, and also we learned how to prepare our dataset in terms of dealing with categorical variables and specifying them manually where Python hasn't recognized variables correctly. So for instance, where years have been recognized as numbers. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Until then, happy coding.